You heard that right. Michael Jordan isn't just reflecting on the past, he's calling out the truth behind one of the most bitter rivalries the NBA has ever seen. Today's story dives into why MJ never liked Isiah Thomas, from the brutal playoff wars that left Jordan sprawled on the hardwood to the infamous walk-off that permanently destroyed their relationship, and the Dream Team snub Isiah still can't escape. And if you think this feud was only about a few hard fouls, think again. Jordan made sure Thomas paid a price that went far beyond the court. To truly understand how deep this beef ran, you can't start with a handshake or Olympic drama. It begins with pain. You have to rewind to the late 1980s playoffs, when basketball wasn't just physical, it was personal. Jordan would attack the lane, ready to hang in the air and electrify the crowd, only to be met with brutal force. In one defining moment, Bill Laimbeer drove his shoulder into Jordan's chest like a linebacker, sending MJ crashing to the floor as the arena fell silent, while the Pistons bench celebrated. And this wasn't a random cheap shot. Detroit had a system, a calculated strategy known as the Jordan rules, designed specifically
in the paint.
They weren't just defending against Jordan. They were trying to break him, mentally, physically, and even spiritually, whatever it took. At the center of that chaos was Isiah Thomas. He wasn't an innocent bystander watching his teammates throw elbows. He was the general of the Bad Boys, the hometown hero from Chicago who helped turn Detroit into a dynasty built on grit and pain. To Thomas, those punishing hits weren't dirty, they were just smart basketball. Don't take anyone else's word for it. Thomas himself once admitted, "Oh yeah, take out his right hand."
Well, that's the Jordan rules, and it was that simple.
What happens when he doesn't hit the baseline?
That's when Laimbeer and Mahorn would go up and knock him down.
That's how deep the strategy ran. Now imagine the contrast. Jordan was the NBA's rising golden child, the next face of the league after Magic and Bird. His game was pure flair and domination. He wanted to humiliate you before posterizing your center. Every dunk, every crossover, a statement of supremacy. So you can only imagine how it felt when every drive to the rim turned into a full-on wrestling match. While the NBA celebrated Jordan as the future, the Pistons treated him like a crash test dummy. And standing in the middle of it all was Isiah Thomas, the smiling leader who watched his crew deliver elbows and body slams like it was war. That's when the resentment simmered and the rivalry turned personal. This wasn't just about basketball. It was about power, pride, and who owned the spotlight. Jordan saw himself as the chosen heir to the NBA throne, the man destined to take basketball global. Thomas, on the other hand, viewed himself as the underdog who had already earned his crown in Detroit, only to have the league's attention stolen by a flashy new superstar from North Carolina. The hatred built with each hit, each playoff, as Jordan never forgot those bruises and Thomas never backed down. This wasn't simply a rivalry, it was war disguised as basketball. Year after year, Chicago versus Detroit.
To take away his right hand.
By the late 1980s, the Pistons had fully earned their bad boys reputation. They didn't just talk tough, they lived it. Every elbow, every shove, every hard foul sent the same message: step into the lane and you'll pay for it. No one absorbed more of that punishment than Michael Jordan. During the 1988 Eastern Conference semifinals against Detroit, MJ was still putting up absurd numbers, averaging 36 points, nearly 7 rebounds, and close to 5 assists per game. But the Pistons didn't care about statistics. Their goal was to break you down. Their defense operated like a pack of wolves: swarm him, hit him, and wear him down until his body gave out. And they were serious about it. Dennis Rodman later admitted that the plan was never really about stopping Jordan, it was about hurting him enough to make him hesitate.
How would you describe the way you felt then and feel now about having been the bad boys?
By 1989, this rivalry had moved far beyond basketball. It had become personal. The Bulls were no longer a one-man team. Scottie Pippen was stepping up, Horace Grant was adding strength inside, and Chicago finally looked capable of challenging Detroit's grip on the Eastern Conference. The series stretched to 7 brutal games, and in Game 3, Jordan unleashed a legendary performance. 46 points, breaking through double teams, soaring to the rim, and hitting jumpers that electrified the crowd. The Bulls won 99-97, and for a moment, it felt like the balance of power was shifting. But the Pistons weren't about to surrender their throne. They still had the Jordan rules, and they enforced them with brutal precision. That 1989 series became a full-blown street fight. Every time Jordan drove to the basket, Lambier met him with forearms, and Rodman pulled him from the air. Every possession was a lesson in punishment. By Game 7, fate dealt a cruel blow. Scottie Pippen suffered a severe migraine, shooting just 1 for 10, while Jordan battled double teams, bruises, and exhaustion. But it didn't matter. Detroit crushed Chicago 93-74. The Pistons moved on, and Jordan left the court defeated, furious, and humiliated. Isiah Thomas and his crew showed no mercy, laughing it off and calling it toughness. To them, Chicago wasn't unlucky, they were soft. Jordan never forgot that. Then came 1990. Same rivalry, same conference finals, another chance at revenge. By this point, Jordan wasn't hiding his disgust. Handshakes and fake smiles were gone. He was coming for blood. He averaged 32 points per game, attacking from every angle, but the Pistons still executed their system flawlessly. Game after game, Detroit's defense chipped away at him like relentless body shots. Another Game 7 ended in Detroit's favor, securing their finals berth. Chicago was left stewing in frustration, while the entire Eastern Conference bowed to Detroit's empire. The Celtics were fading, the Lakers aging, and the Pistons ruled through pain, intimidation, and grit. Everyone, including Jordan, knew what it took to face them. You didn't just play the Pistons, you survived them. By 1991, the stage was set for a reckoning. This was the 4th act in a grudge match soaked in revenge, humiliation, and unfinished business. But the Bulls arrived stronger, sharper, and done being bullied. Chicago didn't just beat Detroit, they embarrassed them, sweeping the Pistons in 4 straight games. No excuses, no migraines, and definitely no more Jordan rules. The torch had passed, and everyone knew it. This time, it was the Bulls playing physical, relentless, and fearless, while Detroit looked tired, old, and broken. Jordan commanded the floor, averaging nearly 30 points per night, and the difference wasn't just numbers.
On the ground. When he comes to the basket, he ain't gonna dunk. We're gonna hit you, and you're gonna be on the ground.
And throat was still there.
We tried to physically hurt Michael.
Bill Lambier followed, then Dennis Rodman, and soon the entire Pistons squad ghosted the Bulls after what should have been Chicago's biggest victory yet. If you thought beating Detroit was the pinnacle for Chicago, you'd be wrong. For Jordan, this was the moment everything boiled over. This wasn't merely bad sportsmanship, it was betrayal. And if you know Michael Jordan, you know that betrayal ignited a fire that was already raging. Rivalries in basketball are inherently ugly, but this went beyond the usual bitterness. Walking off the court without a handshake wasn't just disrespectful in basketball, it was disrespectful in any sport. It was a blatant snub, and the entire arena felt it. Cameras immediately captured Jordan's reaction, first stunned, then visibly building anger. The Pistons had spent years tearing him down, physically, mentally, and emotionally, and now that he had finally conquered them, they couldn't even afford him the basic courtesy of a handshake. Even years later, in The Last Dance, Jordan wasn't over it. When the footage of that walk-off aired, the bitterness in his eyes was still unmistakable. He called Thomas
And the Pistons as they leave the court. I don't think they're cheering for the Bulls, but I think the greeting is for the Pistons as they are headed off.
Not in the heat of 1991, but in 2020, nearly 3 decades later, Jordan still carried the sting. That's how deep the scar ran. Isiah Thomas later tried to spin it, claiming that the Celtics had walked off the court against the Pistons years earlier, so it wasn't a big deal. But for Jordan, it never faded.
There's no way you can convince me he wasn't the asshole.
But let's be real, this wasn't some playful tradition or friendly rivalry. It was pure bitterness. That single gesture, the walk-off, froze their relationship permanently. Jordan went on to win championships, earn global fame, and claim the throne of basketball. For Thomas, however, the respect was gone. No matter how many times their paths crossed afterward, that walk-off lingered between them like a wound that would never heal. If you thought the handshake snub was petty, the Dream Team controversy takes it to another level. In 1992, the United States assembled what is still considered the greatest basketball team ever, the Dream Team. This squad didn't just win gold in Barcelona, they transformed basketball into a global phenomenon. Michael Jordan, Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, Charles Barkley, Karl Malone, John Stockton, and Patrick Ewing, the basketball version of the Avengers. They didn't just dominate the Olympics.
We never looked back and said, oh, they were poor sports, they were bad champions. We were actually grateful of the lessons that they had taught us along the way in terms of how.
For years, the rumor mill churned, whispering that Jordan had a hand in it. The story goes that when the U.S. selection committee was forming the Dream Team, Jordan made it clear, if Thomas goes, I'm out. That was the price of admission, and no one dared risk the Dream Team without Michael Jordan. He was the reigning MVP, the finals hero, and the global face of basketball. The politics were undeniable. Magic Johnson and Larry Bird had their issues with Thomas, yet they still made the team. Jordan's rising influence, combined with cold shoulders from other stars, made it easy for the committee to leave Thomas off the roster. Think about what that meant. The Dream Team wasn't just a collection of the best players, it was the most iconic moment in basketball history, and Isiah Thomas wasn't part of it. This wasn't just a snub, it was personal. Jordan may have forgiven many things, but when it came to Thomas, the respect was gone. Every player who donned that Team USA jersey in 1992 became basketball royalty, the Dream Team immortalized. Every player except Thomas. For him, it wasn't merely missing a tournament, it was being erased from the biggest chapter in sports history. That omission haunted him for the rest of his career. Every time a Dream Team documentary aired or Olympic highlights were replayed, Thomas's name was absent, like he never existed. No matter how many banners he raised in Detroit, the snub left a permanent void in his legacy. Decades later, fans still debate the same question, not whether Thomas was talented, he absolutely was, but whether he was too disliked, too cold, too cutthroat for the brotherhood of NBA elites. That's the sting for Thomas. It wasn't a lack of greatness, it was the world turning its back on him for Jordan. And that's when the revenge flipped sides. The Pistons had mocked Jordan, slammed him, and walked off without a handshake. Now MJ held the power, and he wielded it ruthlessly. Thomas was out, and Jordan was in control. Time didn't cool the tension. Decades later, Jordan reignited the flames. For years, the Bulls-Pistons rivalry lived mostly in highlight reels and radio talk. Younger fans barely cared until 2020, when lockdown hit and ESPN dropped The Last Dance. Suddenly, that decades-old feud was front-page news again, captivating a global audience. Jordan didn't sugarcoat anything. Sitting with a glass of whiskey and his iconic smirk, he spoke from the scar tissue. It wasn't about mutual respect or simple competition. He aired the raw truth. Even with 6 rings and a global empire, the Pistons battles haunted him. The documentary highlighted every elbow, every cheap shot, and, of course, the infamous walk-off. Told through Jordan's lens, the story leaned heavily in his favor. For millions